My name is Kaylee and today we're going to look into the life of one of the foremost of noble ladies of ancient Egypt, Hatshepsut. Her Royal Horus name was Ma'at-Kare, which roughly translates to the goddess of truth is the life force of the sun god. She was born in 1507 BCE as the daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose I and his first wife Ahmose. Her parents had a total of 3 sons and 2 daughters, but unfortunately all except Hatshepsut passed away before her father Thutmose I died. Her husband and half-brother, Thutmose II, was born in 1510 BCE. He was the son of Thutmose I and a minor wife, Mutnofret. He was a lesser son of Thutmose I and chose to marry his fully royal half-sister Hatshepsut in order to secure his kingship. Her father was the 3rd pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. His reign is generally dated from 1506 until 1493 BCE. There is a minority of scholars that date his reign from 1526 until 1513 BCE. But for today's video we're not going to look into this dispute. Thutmose I was a strong pharaoh and made conquests into Nubia in the south and all the way up to the Euphrates in the north. He erected large obelisks at the Karnak temple and he began the tradition of royal burials in the Valley of the Kings on the west bank of the Nile at Luxor. After Hatshepsut and Thutmose II were married and their father Thutmose I died in 1493 BCE, her husband Thutmose II became pharaoh. He was the 4th pharaoh in the 18th dynasty of Egypt and reigned from 1493 until 1479 BCE. Again, this is disputed, but that's a subject for a future video. There have been a number of archaeologists who believe that Hatshepsut was the real power behind her husband's reign, mostly because of the similarities between the domestic and foreign policies between his rule and her rule after his death. In Karnak she is depicted on a gateway in several relief scenes dating from Thutmose II's reign, together with her husband, but she's depicted alone as well. Hatshepsut and Thutmose II had a daughter named Neferure, but Thutmose II had a male heir by a lesser wife Iset before his death. His son was named Thutmose III. Hatshepsut's husband and half-brother Thutmose II suffered from poor health and reigned over Egypt for only 14 years. He proclaimed his son with his lesser wife as the successor, but when he died his son was only 2 years old and not fit to rule over Egypt. Hatshepsut dutifully acted as regent for her stepson and nephew, and it seems that at first she tried to avoid any unrest during this co-regency. But as the years passed she started to act less like a temporary overseer and more like Egypt's rightful ruler. The reason for her role as co-regent becoming insufficient to her is unknown. Egyptologists in the past thought it was her ambition that drove her to become queen, although most scholars nowadays are under the impression that the move of her becoming pharaoh might have been due to a political crisis, maybe a threat from another branch of the royal family, and that Hatshepsut may have done this to secure the throne for her stepson. Before Thutmose III reached maturity, she had declared herself as pharaoh and sent him away from the court to join the army where he then grew up. She didn't send him away just because she didn't want him around. She made sure Thutmose III learned how to be a great soldier, which is of the utmost importance for a ruler of a nation as big and powerful as ancient Egypt. It also isn't like she could have stepped down as soon as Thutmose III became of age. Once she took on the attributes of kingship, that was it. You were a god in the eyes of your people. It's not be a queen for a day, but be a king for as long as you live. In support of her cause, she claimed that the god Amun had taken the form of her father and visited her mother. Amun then told her mother that Hatshepsut was the result of divine union. By doing this, she proclaimed herself to be the daughter of a god. She then further justified her claim to the throne by declaring that the god Amun-Ra had spoken to her, saying, "Welcome, my sweet daughter, my favorite, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Ma'at-Kare, Hatshepsut, thou art the king, taking possession of the 2 lands." From this point onwards, she started to refer to herself as Lady of the 2 Lands or as the female falcon. She further claimed that her father Thutmose I had made her co-ruler and heir to the throne before her marriage to Thutmose II. Her royal steward Senenmet, who both served under her father and her husband, corroborated these stories. There have been historians in the past that have suggested that Hatshepsut and Senenmut may have been lovers, but there is absolutely no evidence to support this claim, and in my personal opinion, this has been a nasty way to try and discredit her, and it's an underestimation of Hatshepsut in the most vile form. These historians, for instance William C. Hayes, called Hatshepsut the vilest type of usurper. She started to dress as a king, even wearing a fake metal beard, just as a male pharaoh would. But many historians in the early 20th century interpreted this as an act of outrageous deception, deviant behavior, or both in what they viewed as her devious politics. For those who don't know, ancient Egyptians were very clean-shaven, with the royals wearing wigs and the pharaohs wearing fake beards, usually made of metal as a symbol of their connections to the gods. Even though Hatshepsut dressed as a king, it was never her intention to pass herself off as a man. To dismiss this as a serious attempt to pass herself off as a man is to misunderstand the Egyptian artistic convention, which showed things not as they were in real life, but as they should be. By depicting herself as a traditional king, she ensured that she was not only seen that way, but that this is what she would become. Inscriptions on Hatshepsut's statues almost always contained an indication of her true gender, by using a title like Daughter of Ra or His Majesty herself. Early in her reign, she sent military campaigns into Nubia and Syria, but being unable to lead the troops herself, she took the military out of the equation. Leading troops into battle was a role strictly reserved for men, so instead of sending soldiers to war, she sent them on trading expeditions. Under the reign of Hatshepsut, many trade routes were re-established that were disrupted in the 100 years under the Hyksos rule in Egypt that ended 4 decades before she was born. She launched a trade expedition into the fabled land of Punt, located somewhere along the southern shore of the Red Sea, a place where no Egyptian had been in approximately 500 years before her rule. 5 ships that were 21 meters or 70 feet long, with several sails, manned with 210 sailors and 30 rowers, were then sent on trade missions. The expedition returned with gold, ivory, and exotic animals including baboons, panthers, and giraffes, and most notably, frankincense and 31 live myrrh trees in baskets of their native soil. This was the first time in recorded history that a plant or tree was transported from a foreign land successfully for a transplant. These trees were then planted in the courts of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri on the west bank of Luxor. Hatshepsut would grind the charred frankincense into a coal eyeliner. This is the first recorded use of the resin in history. The expedition into the land of Punt was depicted on the walls of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. This depiction is famous for the realistic depiction of the queen of the land of Punt, Queen Ati. She is portrayed as quite tall with large breasts, a thick bum and rolls of fat on her body. Ati had excessive curvature of the lower spine, possibly caused by lordosis, which is an abnormal inward curvature of the lumbar spine. The mural displays the riches they brought back to Egypt after the trade mission ended. It shows scenes of the Puntites' village with conical huts made of reeds built on poles above the ground, which can be entered with ladders. This campaign was wildly successful and significantly increased her popularity and enhanced her reputation. Her rule has been perceived as relatively peaceful, and during her reign she was responsible for more building projects than any other pharaoh in history besides Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. She repaired damage done by the invading Hyksos from Asia in the century before her birth. The invasion by the Hyksos is a subject for a future video. Early on in her reign, she ordered the construction of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. The ancient name of her temple was Djeser Djeseru, which translates to the most sacred of sacred places. Her temple was designed and constructed under the architect and royal steward Senenmut, to serve for her posthumous worship and to honor the glory of Amun. The temple of Djeser Djeseru sits on top of 3-layered terraces. Each of these terraces are articulated by a double colonnade of square columns, except the northwest corner of the central terrace. The chapel is located at the northwest corner of this central terrace and therefore it has proto-Doric columns. The 3-layered terraces reach a height of 29.5 meters, or 97 feet tall, and are connected by long ramps. These ramps used to be surrounded by the gardens with foreign plants like the myrrh and frankincense trees. The location of the temple is important, in the valley basin of Deir el-Bahri, being surrounded by the steep cliffs, built partially into the cliff face that rises above it, right next to the terrace-shaped mortuary temple of Pharaoh Mentuhotep II, that was constructed around 2050 BCE. The temple of Mentuhotep II was used as an inspiration to Djeser Djeseru. The pillared galleries on either side of the ramp were similar to those of two successive levels of the temple of Mentuhotep II. The layering of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple is a classical Theban form, with the hypostyle hall, sun court, chapel, sanctuary, and the pylon. As you can see here, a pylon is the term for a monumental gateway of an Egyptian temple. It consists of two towers, joined by the entrance in between. The entrance was generally half the size of the towers. The entrance to the sanctuary is beautifully adorned with hieroglyphs on the pillars. Above the doorway, below the roof, is the image of Wadjet, flanked on either side by two other long serpents. Wadjet was the goddess and protector of all Egypt after the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. She is displayed on a carved relief, as you can see here as well. Once surrounding the sun, or in other words Ra, with her head through an ankh, and once preceding the Horus hawk wearing the pshent, thus representing the pharaoh she protects. The ankh is also known as the key of life. It's an ancient Egyptian symbol, and it represents the word for life. It was commonly depicted held by ancient Egyptian deities, or given by these deities to the pharaohs to represent their power to sustain life and revive human souls in the afterlife. One of the incredibly beautiful displays on the wall are of Hatshepsut making an offering to the god Horus. She is depicted as a male pharaoh, and to their left is an animal skin wound around a tall staff. This is a symbol of the god Osiris. On the northern part of the upper terrace is the solar worship complex located. It comprises an inner sanctuary dedicated to the god Anubis with an outer court. First excavated by the expedition of the Egypt Exploration Fund in 1893 under the direction of Edward Naville. The sun altar was situated in the middle of this complex. This altar courtyard was open to the sunlight, and the rays of the sun would touch the huge limestone altar every day. There was a shrine to the god Anubis in the eastern part of this solar complex. It was most likely not an essential part of the complex, but the exact function of this shrine has yet to be determined. This chapel does come with the first attestation of the text called King as the Sun Priest, which is an important theological tale that showed the significance of the role of the pharaoh as the heir and servant of the solar god Ra. Of course, it doesn't come as a surprise that the main deity worshipped in this solar complex was the god Amun-Ra, with important places being reserved for Ra-Horakhti and Atum-Amun, which are nothing more than different aspects and forms of the sun god Ra. The statues and depictions at Djeser-Djeseru have been stolen or destroyed after her death. It was once home to two statues of Osiris, a long avenue lined with sphinxes and many sculptures of Pharaoh Hatshepsut sitting, standing, or kneeling. In the future, I might create a deep dive for the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. I wish to cover it all, but that would make this video way too long, and we have many more constructions to cover, so we'll move on to the next one. At the Karnak temple, she had twin obelisks erected at the entrance to the temple, which were at the time the tallest in the world. One obelisk still stands as the tallest surviving ancient obelisk on Earth, the other broke in two and has toppled. She had more monuments constructed in and around Karnak, although they have since been destroyed or any mention of her has been erased. Hatshepsut restored the precincts of the mother goddess Mut at Karnak and Luxor as well, but her cartouches have been erased and covered with Thutmose III's name. Chapelle Rouge, or in other words Red Chapel of Hatshepsut, was a religious shrine in ancient Egypt, originally constructed during the reign of the female pharaoh. It was demolished in antiquity and parts were used in other projects, but after its rediscovery in modern times, the chapel has been reconstructed in 1997 using the original materials. The original location of this chapel is uncertain, and archaeologists have proposed two possibilities. One possible location is in the central court of the Temple of Amun at Karnak, and the other possible location is between the two erected obelisks at Karnak. The chapel is approximately 18 meters long, 6 meters wide and 5.5 meters in height. The upper portion is made of red quartzite, and the foundation is built from black diorite. It's most likely that Hatshepsut didn't complete the decorations within the chapel because the upper blocks show only Thutmose III, and the upper registers of the southern outer wall bear a dedicated inscription bearing only his name. These are signs that he was already pharaoh by that time. Many of the descriptions in the chapel describe events during the reign of Hatshepsut. Some of the blocks show Hatshepsut in the royal garb, running with the Apis bull between the markers of her Hepset festival. Another scene depicted shows a pharaoh offering incense before two pavilions. On each side of the three shrines pictured stand two statues of Hatshepsut in the form of Osiris. Later on in the same scene, the pharaoh steers a boat towards el-bahri. This is interpreted as the living king Thutmose III who's steering the boat containing the sacred emblems of Hatshepsut towards her mortuary temple Djeser-Djeseru, therefore officiating her movement from the living into the realm of the underworld and becoming a deity. If this interpretation is correct, this relief is carved under the reign of Thutmose III after the death of Hatshepsut. The inscription found at this scene makes sense in this interpretation as well. The inscription states the following: "The good god, lady of the two lands, daughter of Ra, Hatshepsut." The reliefs in this particular chapel have helped the archaeologists tremendously in helping understand how obelisks were transported from the quarry in Aswan to the temple of Karnak and other places. One relief showed two obelisks tied to sledges and towed on a sycamore wood barge towards Thebes, modern-day Luxor, by a fleet of 27 boats powered by 850 oarsmen. The larger obelisks commemorated Hatshepsut's Hatshepsut festival, which occurred in her 16th year as pharaoh. She is then depicted presenting the obelisks as a dedication to Amun. The Speos Artemidos, or otherwise known as the Cave of Artemis, is a temple dedicated to the lioness goddess of war, Pakhet, built by the orders of Hatshepsut, located at the Beni Hassan cemetery in the governorate of Al-Minya. The temple is cut from the living rock cliff on the eastern side of the Nile, composed of two chambers which are connected by a short passageway. It has an architrave which bears a long dedicatory text with Hatshepsut's famous denunciation of the Asian Hyksos. The outer portico used to house 8 stone columns in 2 rows, of which only 3 of the 4 forming the facade remain relatively intact in modern times. The other 4 internal pillars have completely disappeared. The rock face above the outer pillars is dressed and inscribed with text bearing Hatshepsut's name. All inscriptions bearing her name inside have been defaced and replaced with the name of Seti I. When the 16th year as pharaoh was nearing, she ordered the construction of 2 more obelisks to celebrate this occasion. But one of the 2 obelisks broke during construction and a third had to be constructed to replace it. This broken obelisk still lies in its quarry site in Aswan, where it is now known as the unfinished obelisk and proves evidence as to how the obelisks were quarried. This unfinished obelisk is the largest known ancient obelisk, nearly 1/3 larger than any ancient obelisk ever erected. Hatshepsut was not unique in taking the title of pharaoh. Neferure 6 dynasties before her did the same, and Khentkaus I some 10 dynasties earlier as Hatshepsut as well. What was different between these queens and Hatshepsut is that Hatshepsut was well trained in her duties as the daughter of the pharaoh. During her father's reign, she held the powerful office of God's wife, and she was a strong queen to her husband and well experienced in the administration of her kingdom by the time she became pharaoh. Up until her death, there are no indications of challenges being made by her co-regent Thutmose III, as he remained quite amicably the head of her powerful army. He could have overthrown her at any time as a usurper if he had pleased to do so, which would grant him his rightful place as pharaoh, but he did not do this. Hatshepsut died in her early 50s, around the 16th of January 1458 BCE. As recorded on a single stele erected at Armant, which is located some 12 miles south of Luxor. Her reign over Egypt lasted 21 years and 9 months. No mention of the cause of her death has survived. But in June 2007, a discovery was made in the Valley of the Kings. A mummy was discovered in the tomb of Hatshepsut's royal nurse Sitrein. A tooth fragment was located in one of the jars of organs and was used to help identify the body to be that of Hatshepsut. If this identification is correct, the medical evidence indicates that she suffered from diabetes and eventually died of bone cancer, which has spread through her body while she was in her 50s. However, in 2011 the tooth was identified as a molar from a lower jaw, whereas the mummy was missing a molar from the upper jaw, casting doubt on this identification. Hatshepsut had prepared a tomb in KV20 for herself and her father Thutmose I, and after she died she was laid to rest with her father, who was removed from his original tomb and placed there. During the reign of Thutmose III, most likely in the co-regency with his son Amenhotep II, the mummies of both Thutmose I and Hatshepsut have been replaced. Tomb KV38 now housed Thutmose I, including new burial equipment. It was most likely around this time that Hatshepsut's mummy was placed in the tomb of her royal nurse in KV 60. The erasure of her name and statues almost caused her to disappear completely from Egypt's archaeological and written records. The Hatshepsut problem became a major issue in the late 19th and early 20th century Egyptology. It created many feuds between Egyptologists, as this problem was highly controversial and many Egyptologists were not ready to believe a female could have been a pharaoh. This problem thankfully was mostly cleared in the late 20th and early 21st century, when more information about her and her reign were uncovered. In 2006, a foundation deposit including 9 golden cartouches with both the names of Hatshepsut and Thutmose III in Karnak were discovered, showing that together they've done a foundation ritual at a monument in Karnak. I've seen many conflicting statements in different places that state that after the death of Hatshepsut, it was her stepson and nephew Thutmose III who tried to erase her from history and destroyed her works. But the Red Chapel shows that this might not be the case at all. The Red Chapel clearly shows that Thutmose III continued working on buildings she constructed. He is even depicted as following her restoration works on a detail of the wall in the Red Chapel. This indicates that it was not him defacing and erasing her from history, that it might have been one of his successors that erased her cartouches and left his name. It would be highly unlikely for Thutmose III to resent his stepmother and aunt, especially since she gave him full control over the armies. There has never been any evidence to indicate he tried to claim the throne during her reign, and even after her death, Thutmose III kept her administrative and religious leaders in his royal court. And another piece of evidence to support this is the fact that Thutmose III had built his mortuary temple directly next to that of Hatshepsut. If he had held a grudge against her, he would have never done this. And lastly, after Thutmose III died, his mummy was placed in the cache above the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, where his mummy was discovered in 1881. So it seems that the destruction of Hatshepsut's works started after Thutmose III's remaining son Amenhotep II of a lesser wife became co-regent to him in his old age. This theory is strengthened by the fact that Amenhotep II didn't have a strong claim to the throne, being the son of a lesser wife, and the fact that he claimed to have built many items and monuments he had defaced. We do know Seti I erased cartouches of Hatshepsut at Speos Artemidos and had it replaced with his own cartouche as well. We don't know if Seti I did this to deface and erase her, or if he tried to steal the glory of the construction of this temple. Hatshepsut was a special woman, a great leader, and an incredible pharaoh. Researching her life, the buildings she had ordered to be constructed, the renovations she had carried out, and the way she depicted herself show that she was a person beyond limits. She had the knowledge and intelligence to solidify her claim to the throne. During her reign, Egypt became prosperous and peaceful, with magnificent art and incredibly ambitious building projects. History still remembers her as one of the most successful ancient Egyptian rulers. She couldn't be erased. She was a grand ruler, and in ancient Egypt, just like in modern times, you can never keep a great woman down. Hatshepsut's legacy is important for anyone who feels powerless in society. She sure began life with advantages, but she refused the traditional role assigned to women and even discarded her parents in order to become who she truly was, the daughter of Amun, Pharaoh of Egypt. I loved taking a deep dive into such a unique life and will continue doing so for the queens of ancient times, even if they did take on the traditional roles. Leave a comment down below if you'd like to see more of the ancient queens. But with that said, you've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos and click the bell icon for notifications every time I upload. If you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then click the card in the upper right corner or click the link in the description down below. I'd like to thank my Patreons as well: Richard, Barry, Floyd, James, Scott and NGC6543. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.